welcome everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the co-founders of DMI, Jake Kreindler and Joanne Weltman. We are going to be talking today about what is DMI. Jake and Joanne are going to tell you about themselves. I'd rather not read their bios. There's lots of acronyms that I'm not sure we all understand, so we'll skip that part. And facilitating this is our very own Abby Oakleby, who is also a mom of a child with PWS. So Abby, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. I am so thrilled that you guys were able to do this webinar for our little community of people. There have been so many questions and lots of anxiety over what DMI is, how excited that parents are about the intensives that they've been able to do. And so I just wanted to have this opportunity to ask you guys all the questions so that parents and caregivers can really get a full understanding of what DMI is and how they can access this type of therapy for their children. So if you guys could go ahead and tell me a little bit about how DMI came about and how long you have been doing all of this.
Okay,
well,
so
Abby, thank you so much for having us, first of all.
we are very, very excited to be here. We love talking to families and reaching out and helping in any way possible, because DMI is about making changes in the world, changes in the funding, and supporting parents as best as we can. So let me talk a little bit about myself. I'll try and keep it short, Jake. I won't talk too long. If I do, just say like this. Okay, stop me. Okay, so I'm Joanne Weltman. From my accent, you can hear that I'm not originally from Canada, Toronto, where I'm living now. I've been here for 26 years. I was born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I studied physiotherapy. Always wanted to do pediatrics. Very determined to make differences in the world. Lived in San Diego, lived in New Zealand, and have been in Toronto for 26 years. I've worked in early intervention programs. I've worked private practice, which is smile therapy for kids. And over the 31 years of practice, no, 32 years now, I have been, I've taken every course there is. So I am a PT, by training, but I've taken courses in OT and speech language pathology, and I carry on taking courses. There's no technique that I don't know about. And as I've mentioned before, we've traveled the world before even starting DMI, and we've seen the level of therapy that's out there. And with the skills that I have and the changes that I've made in children with many different diagnoses, getting them to their absolute potential and sending them back to specialists who in different areas who've been blown away and said they've never seen children functioning at such a high level. Quality of life is very important to us, and believing in competence in children is extremely important, and we needed to make a difference. And this therapy was being held back, or this level of therapy, and we know that the funding is always taken away from the kids that need it the most. They need to have beautiful lives and, as we said, reach their potential so they can contribute and just enjoy interacting with their family and their friends. So we started DMI to make this difference and to try and get research done so that we can show that intensive or therapy, funding for therapy can make the difference to these kids. And this is where the money should go. So let me introduce my colleague and very good friend, Jake Kreindler, to tell you his story briefly, and then we'll answer questions.
Thanks, Joanne. So guys, my name is Jake Kreindler. I'm a pediatric physical therapist, born and bred in New York, whereas some like to say New York. And I am in my 27th year of practice. I have been fortunate to work within early intervention as well as school-based therapies. I've also done, early on in my career, I was also doing some neurologically based work with adults. And I've specialized in pediatrics now for over 25 years. I'm excited that DMI has emerged on the scene in the past 2.5 years. We have been able to bring access of this amazing technique to families around the world. We are always grateful to connect and interact with different communities within the pediatric therapy scene. And we are grateful to be here with the PWS family today. I've been fortunate to work with many children with PWS over the years. And although there are some unique challenges to this community, it's always wonderful to see every child make progress. And as Joanne said, DMI was created and continues to grow as the answer to what happens. How am I supposed to help my child? And that was why we created this therapy. And that's why it continues to proliferate and to grow around the world, because we are giving families hope. We are giving families the answer. We're giving families concrete solutions to complex problems. We are able to use our exercises and use our methodology and our information to help families understand the complex nature of what their child is going through and how to bring real life concrete solutions to those problems. So we are really excited to be here today. Thank you, Abby and team PWS here for allowing us this time to share our expertise and knowledge with you. Thank you.
Who can be registered as a practitioner? Who do you teach?
So that's an interesting question. Jake and I started off only allowing physios, OTs, and kinesiologists, exercise physiologists, but we do have extended that a little bit because there's many areas in the world where families only have access to one practitioner. And it could be a doctor or a nurse or someone who's got a bit of background in the medical sciences, someone who's interested in making a difference. And if that's all they have, we don't want to deny those families that help. So we have expanded it a little bit more, and we still are particularly about it because we don't want just any person taking the course. The earlier courses are a little simpler, and a lot of parents do try and copy some of the techniques. But as we delve deeper into the technique itself, it gets very, very complex, and you need to know what you're doing. It's a strong technique. It's not something that should just be played around with and taken lightly. And we always want to make sure the kids are safe and that they are getting the correct information to make those changes.
And so if a family was interested in DMI therapy, where can they find registered practitioners that allow for that safe environment?
Sure. So on our website, dmitherapy.com, if you scroll down in the menu to registered practitioners, you'll find the practitioners who are listed around the world. Here in the US, we have all states broken down by state. So in each state, we'll have all of our registered practitioners. It will list their name, their contact information, as well as what level of DMI training they've taken. So it starts with introductory level A, then goes to introductory level B, then C, and then it goes to intermediate A and B, and then it goes to teachers training. So depending on where they are in the hierarchy will determine how much training they've had. As well as around the world, we have therapists. So in each of the other countries around the world that we have, we're currently in over 40 countries. You could also find people by each location. And it will, again, say their contact information and the level of training they've had.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about DMI therapy. So how can DMI help kiddos specifically with PWS? How can that improve their tone? Tone is so much part of what our kids deal with, especially in the really early stages. That low tone just takes over. So talk to us about how that can improve, and then also what the overflow effects of DMI can be.
So yes, tone is a big thing, especially lower tone and trying to deal against gravity. And that is the biggest thing with DMI, is we are teaching children how to activate against gravity, how to respond. And I think it's not just a tone concern with these kids, it's a sensory issue as well. So we learn to move because of our sensory system and receiving information from the environment. That's one of the phases that we go through. But gravity is a huge one. So we use and play with gravity a little bit in DMI to help increase that sensory information. We sometimes will add a bit of gravity or take some of the effects of gravity away to help the children move more easily, but in a position where they would be normally functioning. So we're allowing them to complete that task. If it's sitting, we allow them to sit, but we might eliminate some of those gravitational forces so that when the tone is lower, they don't have to work as hard. But by still working and exercising and holding these positions for long periods of time, they're learning how to make those connections in their brain, remember it, be able to recall it and do it again. It gives them that window to that opportunity. This is what I can do. And they strengthen, they get stronger. And that's very, very important with low tone. You need to overcome that low tone by strengthening muscles. And they become strong very quickly because DMI is intensive. So just like you and I, we go to the gym. If we had to go to the gym and only do maybe 5 reps of an exercise, we're not going to get as strong as if we did 3 sets of 5 reps, right? So DMI, there's a lot of as well. If we go to the gym and we spend the hour talking to our friends and playing and not working out solidly for an hour, we would go and use that time and do like a circuit training and go from one to another, to another, to another. We're going to get strong very quickly. Also, if we did it every day, as opposed to once a month or once a week, we're going to get stronger. And for these kids, strength is very important as well as the sensory. Jake, do you have anything else to add?
I would love to add something. I love what you said. I think it's important to maybe take it down to add additional information. I think that people, when they learn about a diagnosis like PWS or any other condition where there's risk factors for delay, sometimes we get lost in the diagnosis or the umbrella terms that are thrown at us. And I think it's worth it to kind of dial it back a little bit and kind of understand exactly what tone is and how that applies specifically to children with low tone, as we do in the PWS community. So tone is basically a setting in the brain. Let's call it a setting, keep it simple. A setting in the brain that tells the muscles how much muscle tension to have at rest. Now, us as healthy adults, we're somewhere in the normal range of muscle tone. There could be people who are at the higher end of normal muscle tone or at the lower end of muscle tone. Either way, we're still in the normal range. And that means that we're at the threshold for our muscles to be able to initiate movement and activity in a healthy way. When we are at the extremes, either very low muscle tone, as we see in the PWS community, or higher ends of tone that we see in other conditions, like some types of high tone, CP and other things, we then have the problems that come associated with those levels of tone. When we have very low tone, we have 2 problems. Number one, we're at a lower threshold of muscular activation, which means it takes a little bit more work for us to get to the point where the rest of us start at. And therefore, it's harder for these children to initiate movement. It's harder for them to move smoothly because they're starting at that lower threshold. The other thing is that underneath the tone is typically weakness. And one of the things that we really strive to do, and we are really good at in DMI, is that we're working on what's known as proximal stability, meaning if my core is strong, if my torso is strong, then it serves as the foundation for the use of my head, my arms, and my legs. If my core is weak and very low tone, it makes it more challenging for me to reach my milestones and to do everything else that I need to do. So in DMI, as Joanne had mentioned, we have so many exercises that are working on the strength, but also within typical movement, within neurotypical movement patterns that we're trying to teach the child. And within working on those developmental milestones that we're always trying to achieve, we're building the strength. We're building that proximal stability, that ability for the core to be strong so that everything else gets easier. When a child has low tone, that's not some sort of doom and gloom situation. It's just another obstacle to overcome. And as we work in a healthy way with DMI, we see massive, massive improvements with kids with PWS and any other children with tonal challenges. And we're excited to be able to offer that.
And of course, I have one other point to add. Sorry to butt in. One of the things we've got to remember is that in typical development, children who are very young need to move a lot. It is built into our DNA, it's in our nature. And anyone who's experienced a child who's 2 years old, they just go, 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 go. They need that movement for the brain to connect. Now, when the kids have got low tone, it's harder to move. They don't want to move as much. And sometimes we protect them. As soon as we hear there's a diagnosis, we protect them as if they need to be protected. They don't need to. They need to be treated just like typically developing children and allowed to move as much as possible. And if they don't want to move, we need to support them in that movement. And that's what DMI does. So we really do challenge them as if they were a typically developing child and expect them to be able to achieve just the same. There's no reasons why they can't. And the kids are amazing. They surprise us all the time. And we challenge them, they take the challenge. They love it.
Thanks, guys. I agree. Our kids are amazing, and they always surprise us, which is great. So you mentioned, Joanne, that DMI is an intense style of therapy. Can you explain how DMI is different than just traditional PT and how that has morphed now, I guess, in the last couple of years?
Yeah. So there's more and more research coming out about intense therapy. And as I said, it makes sense because as I mentioned, that there's a window where the children, as soon as they start moving, they just constantly are moving. It's the way, if you look at all the underlying theories behind it, it is the way that our brain, which when we are born, is not connected. None of us. Doesn't matter if you've got a diagnosis or not, our brain's not connected. So we have to move a lot and experience movement and lots of sensory information for that brain to connect. And we've got to do it early. The earlier we do it, the better. So there's a lot of studies out there where they look at, and there's a lot of NICUs out there as well for those children who had to undergo any care in the NICU, where as soon as the children get out of NICU, and even sometimes starting in the NICU and the step-down units, they're starting this very strong lot of movement for the kids to start the brain connecting in the right way and change the trajectory. So DMI is different in that it is strong. We do demand, sorry, the kids are outside, they're making a lot of noise. We do challenge them quite a bit to, within that hour, we expect them to keep up and have the endurance to manage with the therapy. And they do. They get very used to it very quickly. And it's almost like they do get the same endorphin high and that confidence of, look what I can do. It is amazing. So yeah, it is different. It isn't play-based, although we do play with the children. It's exercise-based with play on top of it, not play-based with a little bit of exercise. So the exercises are repeated 5 times. We don't go on and on, but we do vary the exercise. So we might repeat the same skill in a different exercise. There's normally at least about 8 different exercises that happen each treatment, sometimes a bit more. So they do the exercise, they have like a 1-minute break where we give them cuddles or something like that, and then we carry on to the next exercise, and they can work easily up to an hour. Very occasionally I'll start them at half an hour, but they very quickly tolerate an hour session. At my practice, some of the kids actually do several hours. And if you think about the typically developing child, they are running around all day with short nap periods and time for lunch and rest. And these intensives, they really bombard the brain. Intensive exercise as well releases a neurotrophic factor. And this neurotrophic factor is, I think it's a hormone or an enzyme within the brain that stimulates neuroplasticity. It stimulates the brain to grow stronger. And that's associated with intensive exercise. So we're getting a lot of things from doing that intensive exercise as opposed to less challenging. And for neuroplasticity to occur, it has to be challenging. If we keep the child at a very low level and very gentle therapy, they actually will not have those neuroplastic changes happening, because it has to be at a certain level for the changes to occur. Jake, I'm sure you've got more stuff. Jake and I can talk for hours about this. This is our favorite topic.
Joanne, you brought up a very good point, and that was starting to talk about neuroplasticity. And that's really foundational for DMI. And I want to help explain neuroplasticity in a simple way for families who might be hearing this term for the first time, or maybe just heard it as kind of a keyword that's thrown around. It's a very popular word in the world, but unfortunately, I think that there's some misunderstandings about it. And I wanted to help clear that up to our families today. Neuroplasticity basically means the brain's ability to change. But when we look at it from a deeper, more scientific level, the brain is capable of overcoming injury. We could have risk factors for delay, like PWS and any other condition. And what happens is for the brain to be able to tackle any task or function, we need to have a connection in the brain. And an analogy I like to give is that we have a light fixture here up on the ceiling, and we have a light switch on the wall. If there's no wiring connecting that light fixture on my ceiling to the light switch on the wall, I could flick that switch all day long and nothing will happen. But as soon as I connect the wiring to those two pieces of hardware, then the response is instantaneous. And it's the same thing in our brain. If we look at a child or we look at an adult, anatomically, it seems like we have everything in place, right? We have a head with a brain inside, we have extremities, we have arms and legs and a torso. It seems like everything should work, but that's not really the case. Until the brain makes a connection that connects that task or function to the way it's represented in the body, it doesn't happen. Now, once we make that connection, and therapy is a huge part in helping make those connections, help create those connections. So as soon as that connection is made, the response is instantaneous, meaning the brain now has a pathway to create that task or function. Now, when a pathway is first created, it could be very weak. And the way we improve that connection, the way we strengthen it, is through repetition. And as Joanne mentioned, in DMI, the way we strengthen that is we're challenging the child to do new things. And once they make that early connection, we're repeating that skill, but not just by repeating the same thing over and over and over again. The brain actually tunes that out. The brain says, you're boring me. I'm not interested. What the brain likes is a healthy brain. The diet of a healthy brain is variety and variability. And in DMI, the way we achieve that variability and that variety is by performing the same task, the same general skill, but breaking it down into its smallest component parts. So for instance, if I'm teaching a child how to come up into sitting from laying on their back, I have 20 different exercises that I could use to achieve that skill. And each of those represents a new novel approach, a new exciting way that the brain is experiencing that. When we work on neuroplasticity, rather than thinking about what muscle groups am I working on, when I'm working with the child, I'm thinking about how is the child's brain translating what's happening with my hands. When I make that paradigm shift, when I start thinking differently and I start challenging that child from a more brain-based construct instead of from a muscle-based construct, the results could be completely explosive. And that's something we see every single day with DMI.
Yeah, I think in my own practice, I've seen a huge impact on kiddos and how quickly the changes happen from that exercise-based therapy with play instead of the play-based therapy. It's been really, really amazing. But you said that,
Joanne, I'm stealing that line, by the way. I love that.
I know,
line.
it's so good.
But I just came up with it. I was just listening to you and I was thinking another thought, which I have to add in. Yes, we're dealing with movement and muscles, but the benefits of DMI affect the whole brain. And we see kids that are with different diagnoses who could be very low functioning, and all of a sudden the whole brain wakes up and their speech and their eating, ability to eat and emotionally regulate, and down the line, the ability to learn. Everything changes because it's all connected. It's not just muscle and nerve, right? It's everything. It's all interconnected. It's really beautiful, the changes we see.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only is DMI intense in its sessions, but we can style our sessions into not just weekly visits or bi-weekly visits. We can do intensive style therapy. And there's been a huge talk about this in the PWS community, especially in our younger groups, about getting into intensive therapies. There's been a lot of anxiety about not being able to access intensives and the funding for that. And I know that is shifting a lot in the therapy world versus, just cash-paced intensives and using your insurance for intensives. That's changing right now. So don't get worried, parents. It is changing quickly. But let's talk about that anxiety about getting into an intensive. There's Napa Center, which is huge, and a lot of anxiety over that. I want to talk about how intensives can be beneficial and how also DMI is useful in those weekly sessions with kiddos so that our parents can take a deep breath and relax a little bit too.
Right. So I'm going to start. Wait, I'm going to start.
You can start. Okay, go for it.
Then I'm going to give it over to Joanne. And the reason I'm going to give it over to Joanne after I say my piece is that Joanne has created a literally world-class facility at Smile Therapy for Kids in Toronto. And I defer to her expertise and her knowledge in this area all the time. There are so many wonderful places around the world that do intensives, and I've visited many of them, and they are wonderful, and I send people to them all the time. But Smile Therapy is a very, 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 very special place. And if families are able to get up to Toronto and work in Joanne's facility, they will never be disappointed. It is very, the progress that they see and their thought process is very, very unique in the world. And so I'm going to turn it over to her while she blushes now for a little bit. Okay. But before we get to that, I want to first talk about the weekly sessions. Okay. I'm going to say this very, very simply. The more you put into your child, the more you're going to get out. Now, that could be done in a weekly session or in a weekly home exercise program. That could be done with the intensive model. The reason why the intensive model has exploded on the scene is because, yes, we are seeing more progress with children who are doing intensives. And there are now studies that are coming out that are suggesting that a few weeks of an intensive could equal months of therapy, of weekly therapy. But don't be worried, okay? If you are putting into your child, if you are working with your child with weekly therapy and you're doing an effective home exercise program and you are doing it consistently, your child will make progress. We're now living in a post-COVID world. So I just want to share with everybody this amazing story about what happened with a family who I worked with. A family reached out to me over COVID. They have a 4-month-old girl with Down syndrome. They reached out to me because this mom was concerned that she now had very limited access to therapy. And she knew that, from what she had read online, she had a feeling that a child with Down syndrome would have a huge risk factor for delay. And she is not the kind of person who was just going to wait around and let all that unfold. She's a very proactive type of mom. And she was like, I want to do everything possible. We got together and we did some televisits during COVID. And this mom, instead of just doing her home exercise program for a few minutes a day or for making a small intervention each day, she decided that she is going to incorporate the exercises that I've taught her with DMI into her daily routine. Now, she was home, so she was working remotely, and she was with her baby all day long. Everything she did with this child became some therapeutic approach. So the way she held her, she exposed her to more gravity. She made her work harder. Fast forward to when the child turned 13 months, she took her first steps. And within about a month, she was walking. Now, before people think that, oh, that's okay, you know, kids walk at 13, 14 months. Generally in the Down syndrome community, that's very, very early. Many children with Down syndrome walk between their second and third birthday. So for a child to walk at 13, 14 months with Down syndrome is a huge accomplishment, and it really is a testament to this mom's dedication. She is not different than anybody else here or anywhere else. If your child is getting quality therapy a couple of times a week and you are doing an effective home exercise program and you are consistent, your child will make progress too. I think that because the intensive model has exploded, especially over social media and all of the anecdotal evidence, so many people saying how great it is, people think they must do an intensive. Guys, intensives are kind of new. Okay, the model has been around for 10 to 15 years, but only in the past couple of years, it's really exploded. Guys, you don't have to do an intensive for your child to make progress. Your child can make wonderful progress without an intensive. That being said, let's talk about intensives. Okay, so do quality therapy weekly if you can. If you are able to do an intensive, let's talk about it a little bit. I'll give you the basic framework of it, and then I'll turn it over to Joanne, who is going to talk about her facility and some more details about it. So an intensive is basically a block of time where your child is getting a lot of therapy over a short amount of time. So it's generally between 1 and 3 weeks long, where your child is getting therapy 5 days out of those 7, and they're getting anywhere from 2 to 5 hours of therapy a day. Abby, as you mentioned, many of the places are cash-based, but now we see an emergence of different insurance companies and different states who are embracing more of an insurance-based intensive model, which is really wonderful. It gives access to many more families, and it alleviates a lot of the stress around performing an intensive. Now, let's just talk about a couple of the stresses of an intensive. Number one, many times you have to travel. So besides the actual cost of the intensive, which could be cash-based, you also have the travel costs, the lodging, all of that. You also have to be away typically for 1 to 3 weeks from your home, your family, and the scheduling around that could be very, very challenging. Not every family has a great support system, and now suddenly you're leaving for 3 weeks. So there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of benefits. From a neuroplastic perspective, from the brain perspective, we are now barraging the brain with positive gross motor information. So with DMI, when we do a DMI intensive, we are able to give the child 2 hours of DMI therapy a day, really barrage the brain with a ton of positive gross motor information, really driving home that message that the child has to perform all of these different tasks, move through all of these movements, and respond to all of these exercises. And in DMI therapy, a child is always an active participant. We're not passively guiding a child through the process. We introduce an exercise and the child has to actively respond and become an active participant. So on top of DMI or any other physical therapy, there could be other disciplines mixed into that intensive as well. There could be occupational therapy, speech therapy, vision services. There could be specialties within a specialty, which I'm going to turn over to Joanne, things like Trexo and UEU and all of the different modalities that we could use within our sessions. The point is that it's a wonderful tool. It's not a mandatory tool. And I want to leave that message with families. It's not mandatory to do an intensive. It's wonderful if you can do it, but please don't stress out. Before 15 years ago, kids made progress without intensives, I promise you. And they're going to continue to make progress, and they're going to continue to do great as long as you, mom and dad, family, and support people around you are able to chip in and do everything you can to help your child reach their goals. Joanne, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could give a little information about not only what you do at Smile, but also some of the specialty services that families can expect when they perform an intensive.
Okay, so I have lots to say about this because we have kids who come in from all over the world for therapy intensives, but we also have our weekly kids. And I can tell you that the weekly kids, and they don't come in 5 days a week. Some of them can only afford once a week. Some can only afford, some are lucky that they can afford twice a week because the funding is very different in Canada and it is a private clinic, so they have to pay for it themselves and there is no insurance to pay for it. So, and the kids do well. They're going to do well. Sometimes they do need a bit of a boost with an intensive. Sure, they're lucky enough to have us. but some of them never do an intensive and they all do well. So do not worry about that. The other thing with the studies, if you have to look at it, what they're doing is they're taking kids that have had maybe traditional therapy or limited therapy, and then suddenly giving them a boost of intensive therapy and researching it. So of course the results are going to be amazing to go from nothing to something. So yes, of course they will do better no matter what, but you can do the same for your child. And if you can't manage, because some parents, I don't like to pressure parents to feel that they have to do it all themselves as well. But if you can't manage to fit little bits of exercise in during the day, you can always get students or high school students, or you can have a Zoom call with your therapist if they want to learn some of the exercises and take it on themselves. Some of the PT students will come in and practice the exercises on kids for free. So there's different ways. There's aunts and uncles who might take on that responsibility of doing a little bit of extra work with the kids during the week. The more you give, the better, obviously. But again, Jake is right. You don't have to do an intensive. The other thing we don't push our families to do is that they have to come for a set amount of time, because in every family has a limit. So some families can only take off a week, so then they come to us for just a week. If they want to stay longer and they can manage, they've got the support and they can manage with the funding, then they can stay longer. But we don't ever force people to do, there's no rule that you have to do a 3-week, otherwise it's not going to work. We see beautiful results in just a week. If your child needs a bit of a boost and that's all you can do, that's fine. Do not guilt yourself. You do as much as you can. You honestly, you can do home programs with the kids and they can do beautifully. If you look on our DMI Instagram page right now, there's a beautiful video of a little boy called Gavin. Gavin, I can tell you now, has once a week therapy, once a week. And he's done well. And he was severely low tone, like really, really low tone. Also has a genetic condition, but I can't give you too many details about that, but he has done exceptionally well. And honestly, the parents don't have that much time to do lots of therapy at home with him. So he doesn't get exceptional amounts, but he's still done well. So please don't worry about that. Anytime anyone wants to come to Smile Therapy for Kids, you're more than welcome. We are special. I do a lot of teaching to the big clinics around the world. I'm not going to name names. And they do consult with me about all the different techniques, because I take courses in everything that I can, and I apply it, and I keep up with the latest sciences, and I keep changing things and adding things. Yes, DMI is very instrumental in making changes in the funding, and we are pleased to let you know that there are changes coming more and more for the families, so you won't have to worry as much. And the last thing I want to say is, please, parents, don't be gouged. If there's a therapist who's charging an excessive amount of money for a therapy intensive, and maybe they have a big social media, it doesn't mean that they're experts, doesn't mean you have to feel guilted about not going to see them. They shouldn't be gouging. I don't. My costs in Canadian dollars are super low. It's not about the money, it's about helping children. So please, 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 just be wise in your choices. In choosing intensives if you're going to, and you can always reach out for guidance and help to Jake and I at any time if you need that.
Thanks, guys. I have a few more questions that I really want to get to, specifically about therapy. And one of those is how DMI uses gravity and also eliminates gravity to gain a functional task. Some people are worried that adding gravity too soon will somehow cause scoliosis or hurt their children's hips if they have hip dysplasia. So I would love to talk about that, and hopefully, again, ease the worry and help encourage our kids to reach the highest level of function as soon as they can.
Joanne, I'm going to let you do this one because I know you're itching to answer this question.
Well, okay. So first of all, gravity is the thing that can, gravity exists as soon as we get onto Earth, right? As soon as we're born, there's gravity. And unless we get strong enough to manage gravity, it's going to hurt us, right? So if we don't get up and learn how to get up against gravity, if we're not exposed early and we don't develop that strength, that is when our muscles will sink down. We will develop the scoliosis if we're not weak, if we're not strong enough. Very, very, very important to get that core strength, get that alignment. We do a lot of work on muscle stim as well for the kids who are developing scoliosis, to get the right muscles to activate to straighten things out. But you really got to get there early, because the studies have shown that, especially even at night, just resting is when you can develop those scoliosis. So it's definitely not related to exercise. Exercise reduces that concern. Hips is my baby. It is my specialty. It is my passion in avoiding and preventing hip dysplasia. In 31 years of my career, I haven't had one child under my care have to have any form of hip surgery. I've had children come to me after hip surgery and it's not good. So I was born with hip dysplasia. I know it can be prevented or treated or reduced. And again, it's to do with positioning. It's to do with strengthening. And the faster you strengthen, the better. Now, unfortunately, as we were saying, and Jay can discuss a little bit more about how DMI helps to balance and plays with two forces, the upward force, ground force reaction, and the downward force of gravity. And we've got to teach these children how to align against gravity. They've got to learn how to do it. Before, they were floating around in fluid and they didn't have to worry too much. But as soon as they're on Earth, we have to help them deal with it to prevent any of these orthopedic problems. So Jake, you can discuss how we play with gravity a little bit, and introduce the children gradually to gravity. We actually do a graduation.
So I guess the three constants in life, right? Death, taxes, and gravity. I don't know. I just made that up. But what's amazing is that, as Joanne mentioned, as soon as we're born, we're immediately exposed to gravity. And our job in life, especially if we look at the first 16 months of development, that first initial burst, we go from a completely dependent newborn to a completely children who are neurotypical, who will generally be walking generally by 16 months. We go from a completely dependent child to a completely independent child in those 16 months. What's happening over those 16 months for neurotypical kids, and how could we help the PCS community move toward that independence? Well, really what's happening is we're learning to come up and not only sustain gravity's forces, but counteract gravity's forces. Our job is to build our strength and build our ability to hold ourselves up in a gravity-dependent world. So if we look at a newborn baby, all they could do is just turn their head. And by 3-4 months, they're holding up their head perfectly. In that time, they built up the strength to hold up their head against gravity. And it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. We see children then pushing up on their arms and then getting up onto all fours, then crawling and holding themselves up against gravity, then crawling and kneeling, half kneeling, standing, walking. Everything is progressively coming up against gravity and holding ourselves. With that, with each of those progressive skills, we also see the strength that comes along with being able to maintain that postural control. So what could we do for our kiddos? It's not that the scoliosis is caused by gravity. It's the scoliosis and the hip dysplasia are caused by a child's inability to sustain the effects of gravity. When a child is strong enough to sustain gravity and to work against it, these orthopedic issues don't unfold. And that's what it is. we want to start early enough. Early intervention is extremely crucial in this community and any other child with low tone or with huge risk factors for delay. We want to get started early so that we could give the child the necessary tools to start off on the right foot and avoid those bad habits from forming. As the strength builds and the child is able to sustain gravity, then we see that the child is poised and prepared for what the world is going to throw at them. A lot of these problems unfold because of muscle imbalances and because of orthopedic challenges with a child who never really learned that postural control. Once we're strong enough and we're holding ourselves up against gravity, it's almost effortless to keep ourselves up against gravity. So for instance, if you're standing straight, you could stand up for a couple of hours. But let's say your back is hurting you one day and you feel like to alleviate that pressure, you need to lean forward a little bit. You're going to be holding on to something within minutes because your postural control is not aligned and gravity is affecting your body differently. It's the same thing with our kids with PWS. We want to make sure that they're strong enough so that they have the proper alignment, that they have the core stability to maintain their body upright so that their skeleton is stacked properly and that they have to use less effort to hold themselves up. When their muscle systems are prepared and their postural control is intact, they don't get those changes in spinal alignment. They don't get those changes in hip stability. They are able to hold themselves up. In DMI, what we do is we prepare the child by introducing exercises that teach them how to actively sustain and counteract the forces of gravity, how to hold themselves up in different positions. We start with a lot of support, and then we decrease our support over time. As we decrease our support, the child is learning to do it more and more independently because there's less holding themselves up. They are able to do it by themselves. Now, sometimes a child has the opposite problem. They might be able to align their body, but because of gravity, they can't sustain a position. And in those cases, instead of doing the exercise in the typical way, we might do it by lifting the child off the surface. And sometimes if you're looking on social media, you might see some exercises where a child is floating in the air, either on our body or maybe on a board or balance beams. And what's happening is because we're pushing up and gravity is pushing down, we're counteracting some of those gravity forces. We're taking away gravity from that child's body so that their brain and their body can experience a position for the first time. And for many kids in doing DMI, they might stand for the first time in their life while having gravity removed from them or having gravity reduced during an exercise. And that's a really exciting piece of DMI, is that we can help each child by manipulating the forces of gravity is just one of the tools that we have to help a child achieve a gross motor skill.
One other thing, I was just thinking about scoliosis. If a child's got weakness on one side and strength is strong in the other, DMI really focuses on that. So we will work a lot more on the weaker side and less so on the stronger side to balance things out so that the spine aligns. So we look at every single one of these points and we break it down and we find what that specific child needs, because not all children are the same. Every child is unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Talking more about therapy and how it is, especially in DMI, more exercise-based. Parents can get very concerned that their kiddos are crying a lot too. And I think that once they reach a certain age, crying is just inevitable. They just don't want to do certain things. Joanne, I know this is really close to your heart too. And so again, let's talk about crying in therapy and how sometimes that can be okay.
Yeah. So some of the kids, when they do start therapy, it is challenging. And ways that children communicate is to cry. It's never a cry because of pain or discomfort. It's a cry because it is challenging. It's hard. They're telling us it's hard. So in between every single one of those exercises, I give them a lot of love and I help them learn how to self-regulate. And that is one of our jobs as parents, because as soon as babies are born, they cry. They tell us, I don't like this new environment. They cry when their diapers are changed. They cry for so many reasons all day long. It's not just during therapy. Unfortunately, life exposes us to stresses. And we are all born with a hormone called cortisol, which we learn to regulate. And it's our parents and our people who love and care for us that teach us how to regulate that cortisol, those levels that go up when we're stressed, so that we can cope with stressful situations, so we can be in a difficult time and learn to calm down. And that prepares us for life. So these kids, initially, they might cry because it's hard. Always give them cuddles in between and tell them it's okay. In fact, the children end up cuddling into me a lot because they know that I'm their safe point, I'm their security. But they're also, on the opposite side, they feel this unbelievable sense of achievement and reward. So they kind of want it and don't want it at the same time. And just like when we go to gym, it's hard. If I go to a personal trainer and he pushes me, I'm going to want to cry. But once I've done it, it gets easier and easier, and I end up loving it and feeling good about myself. So we can go on a lot about the emotional regulation with crying. It is a thing, and therapists will take time to just give that child that love and support until they start feeling more confident. And some of the kids, within a few sessions, they realize what they're doing and they stop the crying. It's okay as well to have distraction. Absolutely fine. I find if the kids are watching the magical Cocomelon or one of these other distracting videos that are out there, and they go into the zone and they're doing the work, they can still make those connections in their brain. Sometimes when I go for a walk, I'm going to listen to a podcast, or if I'm going for a run, I'll watch something on TV, on the treadmill. It's okay to be distracted while we exercise, and get through those hard times in life. But it's very worth it. These kids going to school, their focus, their attention is different. Obviously, the distractions, we reduce them as soon as the kids are coping, but it just gives them such maturity that they go into school and they're ready to cope. Our kids are the ones that go into school not crying, and the other kids are all crying because they already have that emotional maturity. Jake.
Yeah, thank you.
Jake, anything else you want to say?
No, I think you summed that up perfectly.
Jake, I have a question for you. Some of our kiddos are being discharged really quickly after they start walking. And, therapists will say, PTs will say, oh, they're walking, you're done. And parents can get really nervous about that. Can you talk a little bit more about how DMI can still be very useful and is actually very good for kiddos that have started walking and their next steps?
Sure. You remind me of a story. So I'll tell. I used to work, I live here in New York, and for about 13 years, I serviced the community of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And one of my colleagues was notorious for this. He would discharge kids as soon as they took their first steps. I mean, if this kid took a half a step, this guy was discharging them. It was crazy. So over the years, I've gotten many kids transferred over to my case because the families were terrified that their child would get discharged once they took their first step. So although he was a very good therapist, they didn't want their children discharged so early. What parents have to realize is that walking is an amazing achievement, and it's really such a big step toward a child's independence, no pun intended, but there's so much that comes after. Static and dynamic balance. Just think about it yourself. You take those first steps, your child takes their first steps, their arms are up, their feet are wide, they're very wobbly, they kind of look like a little penguin, they're super cute. And then over time, it takes them time to become more sophisticated with their walking. The arms come down, the feet come together. That takes time. That doesn't happen just after they take their first step. And for our children who have risk factors for delay and they're already delayed in their milestones, why would we discharge them right after they take that first step? They need more help and guidance to be able to get to those next levels. And a child frequently will be able to walk on a stable, flat surface, but then there are so many things that come after. Being able to walk on varied surfaces, right? Being able to walk on hardwood floors in your house, sure, to take your first steps, but then can you walk on carpet? Can you walk across that little saddle between the kitchen and the dining room? Can you walk on gravel? Can you walk on pavement? Can you walk on grass? My gosh, how many times did families say, well, what can I do? You know, during the summer, I would go up to the mountains and work with kiddos up there, and they would say, well, what could I do between sessions? I just take your kid outside. Their feet are so small. They feel every little nook and cranny in the grass and all of those uneven surfaces that prove to be challenges for their balance. You know, we as adults, we don't even feel the surfaces under our feet anymore because we're so used to walking. These kids have so much more to do after they're standing and walking. So being able to walk on varied surfaces, being able to walk up and down inclines, being able to walk on wobbly surfaces or uneven surfaces, all of these things represent challenges that come later. And if you had a hard time learning to walk, if your milestones were delayed, you probably will need help to learn those things as well. So don't discharge your child as soon as they take their first steps. If your therapist is threatening you with that, it's time to either have the conversation that might be challenging or to ask for a therapist who is willing to work with you through those next levels. It's really, really crucial that our kids feel supported and that we could help them get those new levels of skills that will maybe come naturally. But remember, it's not just about getting to the finish line. How are you going to look when you get to the finish line? Are you going to be strong and coordinated and ready to tackle the world? Or are you going to be weak? Is your low tone going to be affecting you? Are you going to be discoordinated? You don't want to get to the finish line like that. You want to cross that finish line with a huge smile on your face. And sometimes you need help for that. So make sure that your child continues to get the therapy until they have reached all their milestones, that their quality of movement is good as well. It's not just enough that they've reached the milestone. The quality of movement has to be improved as well. And I'm reminded of a child with PWS who I worked with for many years. I started with him when he was just entering preschool. I continued with him through school age, through school-based therapy. And that was one of the big problems that this child had, is that he was able to achieve a lot of his milestones, but his quality of movement was so poor that when it came time for him to do things on his own, he really didn't want to explore any of that gross motor movement. And what that translated to in real life is that when it came to outdoor play, when it came to recess, he would stay off to the side. Not because he wasn't capable, but because he couldn't keep up with his peers who did have better quality of movement. And it's something we worked really hard at. And eventually he was able to participate with his classmates in recess, and he was able to become just more coordinated, stronger, and much more confident in all of his skills.
One of the other points I want to bring up is stairs exist. And the longer it takes us to work with the kids on stairs, the more fearful they become. So they shouldn't be discharged. Stairs exist in schools, and a lot of kids struggle with stairs. The other thing that is really, really important is motor planning. And motor planning is not just about being able to move on uneven surfaces or tricky situations that they've got to figure out, but that's to do with all of brain development. And motor planning and spatial awareness affects your skills, school skills, your learning skills. So there's no rush. There's no rush to discharge. It should be really family dependent as well. Like if they're satisfied that they can take over or someone else can take over, sure, but there should be no rush.
Yeah, and Joanna, I just want to add to that point, and thank you for bringing up those 2 points. The stairs and the motor planning are huge. One of the big issues that we have, especially here in New York, and I know it exists across the US, is that a lot of the standardized testing that therapists have to use to qualify children for therapy look at the big milestones, but don't necessarily examine quality of movement. And that is why you can have a child who's walking, but they might be tripping all day and the tests are not picking up on that. They might be really weak, and although they can do stairs, it takes them 10 minutes to go up and down a flight of stairs. These are huge issues in quality of movement. And as Joanne mentioned, it's not just enough that you're doing it. The quality of movement has to be there. The motor planning has to be there. You have to be able to achieve everything. And that means that us as an organization here, that we're discussing today, as well as us as family members, we need to advocate for our children. If your therapist is saying that the standardized test is saying that your child has achieved their goals, that does not mean they achieved their goals. We have to look at the child's life. The child's life is what's important. And sometimes that means we have to go to bat for them. And I know here in the New York City Board of Education, where I worked for 24 years, that is something that came up a lot. And we have to advocate for these kids. Don't just take it at face value that the numbers are saying that your child reached it. Sometimes you have to ask the deeper questions.
Yeah, there were a few questions in our Q&A about how DMI can continue to help kids at an older age, beyond the age of 6. And how we can really incorporate that motor planning part, the stairs, even the visual motor vestibular component that comes along with that low tone can be really beneficial for the kiddos that are even older than that and that are school-based.
Yeah.
Some of the other questions in our Q&A have been around research for therapy and how there's not a lot of research yet for DMI, but I know there's so much happening in the background of DMI for research to come about on how intensive therapy can be beneficial and get insurance on board for paying for some of those things. Can you guys talk about the research that's been happening?
Okay, so yes, research takes time, unfortunately. Quality, high-level evidence, quality research takes quite a bit of time to happen. There are a few centers and hospitals around the US and elsewhere that are working on research, so it will be coming out directly for DMI therapy, and we are waiting for a few case studies to come out as well. But they've already started gathering data, and they're showing huge changes, like very, very big changes in the kids when they look at the data for testing with standardized testing. So it is very exciting. Just be patient. Once it comes out, it'll just help with the funding, help families prove the need for this kind of therapy.
And, Joanne had mentioned before how the funding follows the research. We have been fortunate in that, we've been traveling so much for DMI. We've seen a few states that have already created insurance-based intensives, and that's really exciting. That's really, that really takes vision. It's very forward-thinking to recognize the burden that finding quality therapy, especially as an intensive model, puts on a family. And it's really wonderful to see that there are states that are providing these insurance-based intensives already.
And there's a very big voice out there that can also make a big difference, and that's parents. When the parents stand up and demand, and they want more research, they want funding, they want things to change, a lot of it comes from the parents as well. We're doing our best to fight in the background, but with the support of parents, we just can keep going.
I think there's another question here about DMI and the older kiddos. If DMI can still be beneficial for kids that are over the age of 5, 6.
So
I have a 16-year-old girl who, as long as they are, as soon as they're mobile and require less assistance, hands-on assistance, you can just carry on going with them. There's no limit. Absolutely no. You can challenge them in so many different ways.
So basically, DMI is based on different exercises. Once children are ambulatory, or I shouldn't say that, once children are standing and taking steps with assistance, we then are down on the floor working with a set of wooden boxes that help us create many different scenarios that mimic real life or challenge their balance in different ways. And as Joanne said, as soon as they're mobile, as soon as they need less support, we're able to do it at really any age. I have a child now who's 11 years old. with a condition, and he only requires ankle support when he stands. He's not able to stand alone, but he requires ankle support. I'm able to do all of the boxes exercises with him. And for many of our children with PWS who are ambulatory already by the age of 6, we're able to carry on, as Joanne said, for years to come,
Yeah, thank you guys so much for this. I think I've asked most of my questions here, and I think the community has too. We're just so grateful that you guys were able to answer all of these questions, maybe hope to alleviate some of the fears and concerns that our parents have been talking about on social media about DMI, about intensive therapy, the benefits of it. And I am just so hopeful that the PT and OT community can continue to use DMI to really push our kids beyond what they think that they're capable of, but really reach those higher levels of function and be jumping and playing on the recess playground just like every other kid, and really see them soar to their greatest potential. That's my hope. That's what I want to see in all of our kids. And I know that that's the heart of DMI. And that's why I love DMI therapy so much, is that you guys are just so for the kids. And that's why I got involved with DMI, because that's my heart. And so I'm just grateful for the community that you guys have put out for the PT/OT world. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go, because I've already seen the benefits, and it's just amazing to me. And I'm really hopeful that the PWS community will just jump right on board here, and hopefully get lots of kiddos into some really great therapy that's now available all over the US, multiple countries. Like you said, there are resources out there for parents that can find DMI practitioners on their website in different states. So parents don't have to worry too much about traveling as much anymore to find that quality therapy. So I do encourage parents to continue to look on the website for more and more practitioners being certified in DMI therapy, and find the level that they would like for their child, to really just get that good therapy that our kids really deserve and need.
Thank you, Abby. I want to just share a couple of other ways that families can interact. Obviously, you could always reach out to us by visiting our website, dmitherapy.com. You could contact us through that page, or you could send us an email, info@dmitherapy.com, if you have any specific issues. I also want to encourage families to engage in our community. You're not the only families out there. There are so many families out there with children with different conditions and different delays. There's a huge amount of people in the PWS community who might want to reach out and engage. If you join us on our Facebook group, it's called Dynamic Movement Intervention DMI Therapy Parent Group. That's a great way to interact. There's almost 700 people on there already. 700 families are represented there. And we encourage people to get on there. Ask your questions. We're on there as well. And we're here to help everybody. We are, as Joanne and I mentioned earlier, we created this so that children would get better quality therapy. And better quality therapy is not just about better quality therapy. That translates to a better quality of life. When we get early intervention, when we start early enough, and even if we start later, and we make improvements, even if they're only marginal improvements, that doesn't just mean a child always reaching their milestones. Even those marginal improvements can make a huge difference in somebody's quality of life. And that's what we're here for. We're here for the kids. We're here for the families. We're here to spread this technique to make sure that every child has access. And we're working tirelessly on training more therapists, on getting into more locations, so that there's never going to be a child who feels stranded, or a family who feels that they don't have access to this quality therapy. And we hope that we're able to help you. We hope that our practitioners are able to reach you, or that you're able to reach our practitioners. We're here for you. And we want to make sure that everybody feels that they're being heard and listened to. Again, please interact with our community. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you. Joanne, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, but thank you so much, Abby, for having us. Also wanted to mention, yes, the Facebook community is a huge one, really, really important, amazing parents supporting each other. Social media is an unbelievable tool. The more we share with families, the more families find out about the therapies that can help their children. So we also have an Instagram page. We have a TikTok, Instagram, and obviously Facebook. So if there are videos of successes that you've had with your children, you want us to share, we are happy to share them. It might just mean that another family with the same condition happens to come upon it, and it makes a difference to their lives. So just always reach out. If you want to reach me at Smile Therapy for Kids, you can follow our Instagram. You can look us up at smiletherapyforkids.com and reach out to us. I'm always happy to help out with any orthopedic concerns, scoliosis, and hip dysplasia. Always, we do a lot of work with different children with different conditions at Smile here with regards to scoliosis and hip dysplasia. We've got other tools in our little tool belt as well to help with that. And yeah, we're here to make a difference. We're here to help you. Use your voices, ask us questions, ask us what you want us to share and do, and we will be there for you. That is why we are here. So thank you for this.
Guys.
I really appreciate
No, thank you. This was very, very helpful. And I just want to add one thing. At one point, you guys mentioned the need for parents to kind of speak out and advocate. We have an amazing parent advocacy group. So at any point, if we can partner with you to make some movements there, please let us know. Dorothea, thank you for jumping on. She spearheads this. We would love to partner with you to help families be able to utilize their insurance for this therapy.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll be in touch, and we'll definitely do everything we can to help this wonderful community.
Thank you.
Yeah. Working together is going to make a difference. It really will. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Teamwork.
Teamwork.
All right. Thank you all so much. And Abby, thank you for leading this for us.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to do this for this community.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.